This is the Conscious Radio Network.
All right, and so we're back here, and it is February 8th, and here it's just 9:15 Eastern Standard Time. We're here with Reverend Ben Cox of the Chapel of Spiritual Light here in Orlando, Florida. And so we've been talking about mediumship, we've been talking about spiritualism, and we're going to go back to Reverend Ben right now with a quote here. And so go ahead, Reverend Ben, and what is the book, the author, and go ahead with that.
This is out of my thesis. And where did I take this from? I don't know, some source. Anyway, this has to do with the cross-correspondences case. And there were at least 5 or 6 on the other side that were involved in this. And, of course, the whole thing was headed up by Dr. Myers, who organized them all. But throughout the decades of correspondence, and there were decades because it started in 1901, and the last communication I was aware of was 2008. So it's been 107 years that Myers has been organizing things. The dead were able to convey some information about what it felt like to be dead. Edward Gurney said, "You never seem to realize how little we know. Sometimes I know and can't get it through, but very often I simply don't know." Myers, now this is one of the greatest quotes. Dr. Myers said, "The nearest simile I can find to express the difficulties of sending a message is that I appear to be standing behind a sheet of frosted glass which blurs sight and deadens sound, dictating feebly to a reluctant and very obtuse secretary." That's us, the mediums. We are reluctant, obtuse secretaries. "The feeling of terrible impotence burdens me. I am so powerless to tell what means so much. I cannot get into communications with those who would understand and believe me." Another quote, another spirit sent a message. "It is for us a gargantuan task, the reaching back." Now this is important. "It is only to those whose hearts hold a welcome for us that we can come with any ease." So if you're going to be working with a medium, your heart must be open.
It's really a divine appointment.
Yes.
Between all involved.
Yeah.
The inner mind is very difficult to deal with from this side. We impress it with our message. We never impress the brain of the medium directly. That's out of the question. But the inner mind is like soft wax. It receives our thoughts, their whole content, but it must produce the weak works that clothe it. That's what makes cross-corresponding, and I'm going to talk more about that later, very, very difficult.
Yeah, and so that, it sounds like this is how the medium will receive the message and where it comes through within the consciousness of the medium that we're getting to right now.
Right. See, it has to do, we are all human filters. Got to face that fact. There's some things that I know real well, and there's other things I don't know a whole lot about. They're not going to talk to me about quantum physics unless they draw me a really good picture. But can they talk about the structure of a Beethoven symphony all day long? I can do that. Or are they going to talk about English literature? I can do that. But they're going to pick, for me, what I know best and what I'm most familiar with to work with me. And they'll do that with any medium.
And so it's a strengths-based approach.
Yeah.
It's whatever works with you is what they're going to use. And does that mean that I'm going to attract a nuclear physicist who has passed over into the next dimension? Well, if he wants to talk to his family and identify himself, we can certainly do that. But if he wants to talk to me about quantum theory, he's probably going to need to go find another medium.
That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Now, also spirits that come in to give a message to us living three-dimensional beings here on this earth plane. Sometimes these spirits will give these symbols or images and stuff like that the medium themselves are like thinking, whoa, what is that? You can't make anything of it.
So what do you do with it?
So, yeah, what do you do with that image? What? Give me another. Does it give me another image?
Well,
give me something that I can relate to.
I'm going to send you to Eloise's disc on the law of symbols.
Right.
And Edgar Casey's book on symbols.
Yeah.
Symbols work a couple of ways. Symbols are pictures, diagrams, drawings. They may even show you a mathematical equation, which might to you mean nothing, but if you quote it to your client, they may understand it perfectly. Okay, a symbol is something that stands for something. It means something. And it doesn't have to mean anything to the medium. It has to mean something to the recipient. That's one thing. But there are general symbols. Like water generally has to do with emotion. Trees generally have to do with certain things. On and on. But each one of us as a medium has our own symbolic language which the spirit world knows. And they will work with you within your symbolic language. Now, does that mean they will never expand you and have you grow? No. And they'll work with you to help you with that. But, like I said, we all have our personal vocabulary. And you have to, the question you always have to ask yourself, well, I'm seeing this. What does that mean to me? I mean, I never forget the first time I got an alligator for somebody, or a kangaroo, or surfing, you know. Oh, no. You get all kinds of things. And I remember watching some of the mediums, the students at Cassadaga. They were beginners. They were in the Grove service. They were giving messages, and they were struggling with symbols. What does this mean? What does this mean? That's why, as part of my training and my education, I read all the Casey books on symbols, and I got Eloise's, of course I studied with Eloise Page too, but I got her disc on the law of symbols, which for all of my students, I've given them a copy of that to study. Because you can memorize certain meanings for certain symbols. You see water, okay, what if the water's dark? What if it's stormy? What if it's riled up? What if the water's very placid? You can see all the way to the bottom. What if? And you're going to ask all those questions. And you're going to answer. Based on what you see and hear and feel is what you're going to interpret.
And so really it sounds a lot like, to most people who are probably out there, like dream symbols books that tell what these particular symbols mean in a dream. Of course, that's the author's interpretation, however they put it together.
And a lot of those are general. A lot of those are general. They are not the personal kind. Does that mean they cannot be helpful? No. It can be a starting place.
Right.
But I'm not a great dream interpreter, but people call me and we talk about dreams sometimes. And I will look up, if I don't know it right off the top of my head, then I'll look it up and I'll research it.
And it seems like, too, a lot of these symbols might come more from the psychic end of the spectrum,
yes,
to a degree.
Right.
That's, what I'm getting. Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. And so it's almost like whoever is in spirit on the other side might connect energetically with that loved one who is here on this side and have them almost wearing, it's almost like the light bulb that goes on above the head, for instance, and then this is what's brought through for the medium to tap into and see.
Right.
Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah.
Now, as far as, what is your opinion as far as spirit coming in through a dream as a person is sleeping?
Definitely, because that's, you see, one of the problems we have with receiving communication with spirit is getting us out of the way, getting the ego out of the way, getting us and the problems of the day and the body and all that stuff. When we're asleep, all that's pretty much at rest. Yeah. And you can receive information. People will come through and talk to you, give you information, and it's really great.
Take a vacation.
Yeah.
Now, with that, could you talk a little bit about, maybe astral travel and how that might play into the subjects of what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah.
Well,
lucid dreaming, etc.
Yeah, astral. With me, lucid dreaming simply means that when I'm dreaming, I'm aware that I'm asleep, and that's good because I have trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
But astral travel, if you dream that you are flying, and you're flying over land or you're flying over water, you're probably traveling out of body. And the interesting thing is that when we are out of body doing astral travel, there are no limits. You're not stuck in the earth plane. You can travel throughout interplanetary space and go see things and go investigate things.
Yeah.
It's really cool. When we were studying that years ago, I remember we went into a deep meditation, and our teacher told us to go, to rise up out of our seat and to go travel, go find a situation that we could describe. Well, my brother-in-law is a Baptist preacher. So I went to his house in Orlando, and I found him in his study, and I found him reading his Bible, and he was reading a certain book. And I called him when I got home. I said, I was looking over your shoulder at such and such a time. Were you reading the book of such and such? Yes.
Yeah.
Remote viewing.
Yeah.
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 So all that goes together.
Yeah.
All that goes together.
Yeah, there's very many modalities of psychical phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
And abilities, no matter what you name it, whatever you label it, remote viewing, astral projection, astral travel. I mean, there's many different modalities out there.
Right. Medical intuition, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Being able to
Yeah.
see what's going on in the cells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Psychometry.
Medical, intuitive, psychometry, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing when we're talking about all these different ways that these awarenesses can manifest. Once again, that might be different strengths for different folks as well. Typically, how do you see these strengths manifest? What are the first ways that you typically see folks develop in, predominantly?
They have a knowing about certain things. They know things beyond what the ordinary person would know. And sometimes they have trouble expressing it. Of course, you always have those people that when the phone rings, they know who it is before they pick it up. Or when somebody asks a question, they have the answer before the question was asked. Things like that. But you have people who are just, they're intuitive. They know things about other people, about situations, about weather, and they see things a little differently. They hear things, they feel things, they know things. And sometimes they're just on a different wavelength. Like Sydney Carter. Sydney Carter has seen spirit since she was a little child. I did not see spirit as much as I knew things. Mm-hmm. And I felt things, saw things. But it works differently with different people. And, looking back, it's to me it's interesting because when I decided I was going to study to be a medium, I was 39 years old. I didn't know what a medium was until I started to study because it wasn't part of my family or anything like that. And I realized once I started doing it that I'd been doing a lot of this kind of behavior since I was a child. I thought, oh, that's what this is.
Right. It's almost you can put a name to the phenomena. You can put a word to it and describe it. What would you say to folks out there who might have some of these abilities and maybe it's really coming through and almost causing them some personal disruption because they've been told by certain religious wounding. Let's just go right there.
Yeah.
What happens to folks when they start becoming more aware of this but haven't yet put it together and given it a name?
I first of all would send them to a development class, not for the purpose of becoming a medium, but simply to develop their own consciousness of themselves and how things work. Then, as they get into it and they figure out what's happening, if they decide they want to study for mediumship, then that's a whole other level. There's people that have sat in development classes for years and years who have no desire to be a medium at all. They just want to develop themselves to the very highest level that they can. And that's commendable. It's not a problem.
And this would be going more toward, knowing what my stuff is and what I've been through, what I've experienced, so as to rise above, which would be greater personal awareness and integration, which would be through psychotherapy for anything like that, getting to learn about other religions too as well, and just whatever you can learn about.
In my opinion, I feel that everybody has a level of a psychic awareness, a level of intuitiveness. And like in most cases of all paranormal phenomenon out there that people experience, it's due to the client that is experiencing it, that they have a level of psychic attuneness that they not even consciously aware of yet.
Unless they've had it beaten out of them in certain regards as well, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because there are people like Nell. I can't remember Nell's last name, but the book is called Hellish Nell. She was an English medium. Remember I talked about her in class? And they did everything in the world to try to stop her from doing what she was literally appointed by divine source to do. She even served jail time.
Wow.
Because they told her she was a witch. Witch had nothing to do with it. It was really something. In her trance state, she was accessing the records of the British Armed Forces and was giving out the specification for defenses and plans and things like that. And the British government had to shut her up.
Wow.
So they accused her and convicted her of being a witch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Or espionage or something like that, right? Oh my gosh.
She was quite something.
Now, going back into the science of spiritualism, as we see it play out, in particular, thinking about that case of Nell, there's validity right there.
Right. But if we were going to talk about science and mediums and all that, okay? A medium is a person conceived of as serving as an instrument through which another personality or supernatural agency manifests itself. Which means that I, as a medium, am aware and listening to vibrations and so forth from the next dimension. And can that vibration take over my body and use my vocal apparatus? And the answer to that is yes, it's called trance. So yes, that can certainly happen.
And so this would be like trance channeling.
Right. Which is exactly what we saw beloved Kate do this morning. She closed her eyes and put herself in tune, and the angel Ariel used her physical body to deliver information to all of us.
And so this is, of course, now we're going to go further with this. But you can go to a lot of, spiritual or metaphysical bookstores, pretty much every town, unless you're in the heart of, certain areas of the United States, you might not find one, but usually don't have to look too far. And of course, you can always go online and find these things. However, let's talk about certain famous works that have been channeled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because this is probably going to blow people's minds here when we really think about it. I mean, we can go through, we can think about, Seth, or we can, whatever, when you get through. But some of the bigger works that some people might have in their own homes that might not even realize were channeled.
The ones that I'm aware of course, I'm very much into the cross correspondences case. That was led by Dr. Frederick Myers from the other side. Dr. Myers died in 1901. In 1931 and 32, he dictated, are you ready for this? He dictated 2 books to Geraldine Cummins, an Irish medium. One was called Beyond Human Personality, and the other is called The Road to Immortality. And I have studied both those books, and they're absolutely remarkable.
And so these are accounts from the other side of what the experience is.
Yes.
Yeah.
In terms that we can understand being on this side.
Well, what he told us was that there are basically 7 planes on the other side. From the lowest, closest to the earth, which is where we're going to go when we pass out of the body. And then, again, spiritualism is all about growth and progress forward, a forward movement. So we're going to move upward through these planes. And when you get to the 3rd or 4th plane, and there's different experiences in each one, and I think it's real interesting that there's 7.
Yeah, 7
because
heavens.
Aristotle talked about
Yeah.
7 crystal spheres, and there's been other 7s throughout history, and here comes Dr. Meyer with 7 planes. But the 3rd and 4th plane is the last place that you can reincarnate from, that you can come back, and probably the last place that you can really communicate from. Because once you get to the 6th, 4th, or 5th, or 6th plane, you are, quote, out there.
It sounds like we're talking about ascension here in other terms as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Another thing, too, is 7 is a very prevalent number in Freemasonry.
Yes. Yes.
3, 5, and 7. But 7 is very prevalent.
But by the time you get to beyond that 3rd or 4th plane, the 7th plane, if you want to talk about that, Myers says that to remember that he was not a religious man, but his what he wanted to do in his whole life was to experience, and he wanted to communicate. He said in these books that he had personally been up through the 4th plane, but he had talked to those who had been beyond. And by the time you get to the 7th plane, you are out there and you are becoming part of God.
At a more moment-to-moment awareness sort of level of being.
Mm-hmm.
And you lose all emotional context with the earth plane. It's pure spirit. It's pure experience.
It's the isness. It sounds like it really the heart of enlightenment.
Yeah.
At that level.
Yeah, he says that the 7th, and I'm quoting here, the 7th state baffles description. It is heartbreaking even to attempt to write of it. The passage to the 7th state means flight from the material universe. You dwell not only outside of time, but outside of the universe on this last plane of being. It might be described as a passage from, you'll like this, from form into formlessness. But don't misunderstand that term, formlessness. He merely wants to indicate an existence that has no need to express itself in a shape.
Yeah.
The soul enters that 7th state, passes into the beyond with a capital B, and becomes one with God.
You know, that's interesting too, because when we think of monuments and all of these edifice-based realities that we have here, on this earth that mankind has built and honed from stone and moved. What does that do, and how does that sit compared to this level?
Yeah. That's also very representative with the 7 chakras. You start at the first chakra, the root chakra. We start from the ground up.
Right.
That first chakra, and we move our way up to the 7th and out.
And it goes beyond purple. It goes basically
yeah.
to air. It
Way
goes
up.
to just
Yeah.
transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
See what book is that one?
So this is Life in the World Unseen by Anthony Borgia. And, this book, to me, as you recommended, is brilliant.
Let me tell you about that book. That book is so cool because the spiritualist person is going to have to deal with the Christian church and the restrictions. This book, these books, because there's 3 of them, and then there's one called Facts, and you get things like the Lord's Prayer and, what actually happened. Well, these books were written by a Church of England clergyman who passed over. And he had written all kinds of books and things, and he got to the other side and realized that he was wrong. And he asked for a special dispensation to be able to correct it. And so they let him speak through Anthony Borgia. There's Life in the World Unseen 1 and 2. There's The Unseen World, and then there's Facts. There's 4 volumes. And it's absolutely brilliant stuff.
Huh.
It's positive. It's hopeful. It's all about forward movement and learning. It's great stuff.
And what I found to be so interesting are the parallels on the other side, the world unseen, as that we have in this earth plane, the various levels of where people live and how they live and where they're stuck and what they've identified with and their lot on the other side, so, as such.
There's a lot of times when I, as a medium, I'll tell, people, my symbol for alcohol is a beer bottle. If they show me a beer bottle, it's a little hard to deal with because that can mean anything from 1 bottle of beer a year to alcoholism.
Yeah.
And then once they start it, they have to take me through the process. But many times I feel like that a man has crossed over and he's met some of his buddies who were here. And they're around a table, and they've got some cards, and they've got some beer bottles. And they're really enjoying themselves. Or sometimes I see people, and they're doing gardening. Specifically, I often get women who really liked roses. Not always, but a lot of times. But you usually find them doing what they did here. And we know that Beethoven has continued to compose. That's just one that's been channeled.
And
there's others.
And in this book, they talk about that.
Yeah.
That there are this music training and arts of whatever they wanted to do. And every piece that's written over there is in its purest, highest form. And that what came through is just, a mere distortion of how beautiful it really is played over there that you could listen to.
It's the sprinkles on the donut,
Yeah.
Not only that, too, is like the reincarnation of, I wouldn't say ascended masters, but reincarnations of Mozart or Beethoven or Edgar Cayce.
Yeah. This is what I've been trying to figure out for years. I mean, I love Maria Callas. I think she was the greatest singer of the 20th century, and she's never come through. I may be wrong. I think she may have come through one time. But I would like to know who the soul that Maria Callas was before it was Maria Callas. I have some ideas, but I'd really like to hear from her. I'd like to hear about where she is and what she's doing. That's just me.
Okay, so I have a question for you because I've heard you speak about this before, and I find it to be fascinating. And this, I imagine is going to come from sort of a quantum multidimensionality. But thinking about the concept of a loved one who is, say, crossed over, and yet perhaps they've already come back in another body, and yet a piece of that consciousness also remains. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's interesting.
Well, we can choose to reincarnate, especially if there's something that we would like to readdress or try to do better choices, or if there's a situation that our return can resolve.
Like karma, as such?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like Dr. Brian Weiss's son, I think he lived 3 days. His heart was in backwards. It was a chicken heart. But by his birth and his living for 3 days, he solved some sort of karmic problem in the family. So there's all those things to consider. It's really remarkable.
And so it's also possible for, say, that intelligence to come through as the loved one, as that person who is on this side would know them to be, to be identified as, for that comfort. And yet at the same time, already that soul, if we want to refer to it as soul, is already in another body.
Because you could reincarnate, but there is an essence of you that remains in the spirit world.
Yeah.
So you can do both. I remember at the end of What Dreams May Come, they decide they're going to reincarnate. And both of them say, I'll find you. And it turns out that one of them is a doctor in the U.S., and the other is born in India. And when they get together, they solve some disease problem. That's the plan for the next time.
Yeah.
And there is, according to Casey and others, there is a time in the bardo, it's a Tibetan word, bardo todo, the time in between, where you plan and structure your next existence.
You choose the parents and all this kind of thing.
Oh, I'll never forget when I told my religion classes that. Here I am, I'm teaching in Groveland, which is Bible Belt. And they came in, they wanted to know what I thought, so I told them. And I said, you pick. Before you come through, you pick your sex. You pick what color eyes you're going to have, what kind of hair you're going to have, if your hair is going to fall out early or not. You pick your relationships through your next life based on what you need to learn. You pick your sexuality because of what you need to experience and learn. Because we need to experience and learn everything, all the different roles, all the different relationships. So if you're in a family group, chances are your family group has traveled and reincarnated together before. Okay. And I would tell him, you pick your mother, you pick your father, you pick, And I say, how many of you blew it? And the hands would go up, But you picked him for a reason. Yeah. You may not know that reason right now, but you picked him for a reason.
Now, why do you feel that we have that veil of forgetfulness, that amnesia?
Because it gives us choice. It would take away choice if we came through knowing all that. See, I came through the birth process being aware of 5 or 6 past lives and discovered a 7th after I got here. I was always a weird child. You just have to know that. But first of all, I knew I was attracted to the oceans. I knew I had something to do with Atlantis. When I started reading about Atlantis as a child, it didn't surprise me. It made sense. I know that I had a life in Renaissance Italy because Italian's easy for me. And I had dreams. I had dreams that went on for years. And at night I would travel, and if I ever get to Italy, to this little town, wherever it is, it's in Tuscany, I know that, I will walk down the street, I'll go in a church, I'll go up a stairwell, and I'll sit in the organ loft where I was studying with the organist, and I can look over and the priest is performing Mass. I was learning to be a Catholic organist. I know that I was a composer in the court of Louis XV, Louis XV in France. Hence the fact that when I learned French, I wasn't learning it, I was remembering it.
Mm.
I was also a composer. And when I composed music for public display, it was usually mediocre. But when I composed music for the church, for me and God, it was superb.
Yeah.
So, I also found that I had 3 lives in ancient Egypt as a great teacher. I taught the royal families right under the pharaohs. I had at least 3 lives there. So between Atlantis and the pharaohs and the other 2, that's 6. And then after I got here, I discovered I had an existence as a Jewish musician in Hitler's Germany.
Hmm.
And I died in World War II. I didn't die in the Holocaust. I died a natural death.
Yeah.
And I came back by 1948. And I have been told by different mediums in different areas of the country that didn't know me that this is my last time. That I will make ascension. I'll be given a certain assignment, either to work with a country, a person, whatever.
Yeah.
Wow.
But like I said, the kids wanted to know how I thought things worked. And I told them. And I said, you're perfectly welcome to go home and tell your parents that your history teacher's insane, but tell him that you asked the question and he answered it. I didn't have trouble all year long.
Yeah, that's really something, and that's through the authenticity, I would imagine. So what were their takeaways by the end of the year? What have you heard from those individuals who had been in that class since, those who might have kept in touch or looked you up?
I still hear from high school students. They would go to college like Full Sail or something. They'd come to Cassadaga and find me, and they would do their senior film project by interviewing me. They were still interested. They were still asking questions. So if I didn't do anything else, I got people to think. And you'll find I do the same thing at church with lectures and things like that. I want people to think. I want people to develop and grow. I don't want to tell you what you already know. I want to tell you what you don't know and get you to question and get you to think. Do you have to agree with me? No. That's not part of the picture. The part of the picture is personal growth.
And see, that's the thing. And it's been my personal experience many times over when I go to a particular, say more, what would I call it? Any of the Christian bent as such. A lot of the time when I've gone back to that kind of a setting, I find it to be so thin and without any substance to move forward, really for that personal development and integration.
Well, see, that's what I keep getting from people at church, is that they love what we're doing because they're learning and they're growing and they're getting answers to questions. Am I a traditional spiritualist? Probably not. And there's other churches out there that don't like what I do because I'm out of the box. But I've had the people at church tell me, if you try to take us back in the box, we won't go.
What would be back in the box? What would be the essence of back in the box?
Yeah.
Lectures about ancient spiritualism and lectures about how spiritualism started with the Fox sisters, just reviewing old stuff. Nothing wrong with it. Now, if you had a new group that had never heard any of it, that'd be a different story.
Yeah.
But to just regurgitate the old stuff over and over and over,
Basically introducing world religions, the history of religions.
Well, see, one thing I have fun doing is I'll take a Buddhist teaching and twist spiritualism in with it and come up with my own take on things.
Right.
And I give that out in church, and people think that's cool.
Right. Yeah, it's not stagnant. It's not just giving more of the same, right? Because that's what I think that's what people are tired of is more of the same, more of the same, more of the
Exactly.
same every week,
Yeah.
more of the
That's
same.
why we had a service like this morning, channeling the angels, playing the gemstone bowls. That's why I want to have message services. I don't want every service to be healing lecture messages. It's okay, especially if you get a medium who's going to really expand you with a lecture and messages. But the danger is there of the same thing week after week, which is the danger in the Christian church, which is the danger in the Jewish synagogue. Because you go through a certain rote. You read this, then you read that, and oh my stars, the church that does that is the Church of Christian Science. Everything's read out of Mary Baker Eddy. Is there anything wrong with it? No. But there's no inspiration.
And to think about it that way, it's stagnant. Yeah. How far are you going? And that's what acupuncture would be addressing, or a body worker or an energy worker is to get the stagnant stuff moving again.
Right.
And you want to get people moving and you want spirit moving. And isn't that really what it's about? I probably going way back, that's what it would be about. It's about life and
See, I've been
Evolution.
I've been told when I told one group from a church that I was very liberal, and they said, well, we don't believe in liberal. We believe there's one way to teach spiritualism and one way to do mediumship, and that's it.
And what does that mean?
And I'm going, because that's in the box with the lid shut.
You see, I have a teacher out in Santa Fe who will change up each retreat or each day and the way that a meditation will go. Anything, it's always going to be different, and it's purposefully different so that it doesn't become a dogmatic kind of religion, where it can actually be spiritual and it can be the experience, a new unfoldment, instead of just the same squelched down.
Yeah.
Because that's not growth. That's not moving forward. So,
And that's when I schedule speakers and when I schedule things for our church, that's what I got in mind, is reaching out. I love days like today because they're different. And I remember the first time Kate came last year, some people were saying, I just didn't get this. And those same people were back today saying, I couldn't wait to hear her again. And I thought, yes, gotcha.